Thank you for coming out bright and early for the secrets of the DSFF. We're going to make this a really kind of comfortable, casual talk about the festival. We do have a slideshow that John prepared that steps you through what we go through in an average year to run the festival, but then we'll open it up to questions to you guys. So feel free to come close, too, if you want to. I want to make this like a little fireside chat.
We need a fire.
Just need a fire.
So my name is John LaBonney. I'm the director of the Damn Short Film Festival, and thank you. Thank you very much. And the executive director is Lanier, and welcome to Secrets of the Damn Short Film Festival. We're going to tell you all the dark secrets that you always wanted to know, but were afraid to ask. So we can get the next slide. All right, this is what we're going to cover a little bit. The annual festival calendar. It's a year-long process to put the festival together, and we in fact start the day after the previous festival ends. We'll talk about our budget, the process in creating this schedule, and tell you some of those secrets that you've all been waiting to know. We left those to the end so nobody walks out early. Slide.
All right, so let's start with February. The festival is over. The first thing we have to do the day after is tear it down. So we have to move return all the equipment, clean up the theater, pack up the lounge, stuff it all into our office. We have an office at the Boulder Dam Hotel up on the second floor. Then we have to return things, like we'll return filmmaker exhibition copies if they send us a good copy of a Blu-ray, or in past years it would be tapes. It's gotten much easier. We used to have to mail back very large beta SP tapes and things like that. And now we're almost to the point it's all digital. So that part, luckily, is becoming simpler. But then there's other things like sponsor receipts that must go out for tax purposes, and receipts to the donors of the auction. And then also it tends to be that the grant that we apply for most, which is the Nevada Arts Council, has a deadline pretty close to our festival. So in the past, it's been a couple weeks. We'd had to turn around and do the grant application. I think it's later this year. Is it more like June?
No. The final grant report is the second portion of our grant. We receive a grant from the Nevada Arts Council that helps us put on this festival, and we really appreciate that funding. In fact, the Nevada Arts Council has come down to the fest this year for the first time, so it's very exciting for us. I've been up to their office in Carson City before to meet with them. But the final grant report is part 2 of the grant. And the way it works is we apply for a grant, and then after the event, we have to submit a final report to get the final portion of the money that is allocated for us. So this is the second part, the back end.
When's the deadline for the next cycle, though?
Yeah, that's coming up in a slide soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Got ahead of myself.
Slide. One of the things we do after the fest, we're pretty close after, is we have a post-mortem board meeting. We discuss what went well and what didn't. And it's always a spirited discussion. Everybody who attended the fest has ideas that they pass along to us and comments. And we talk over all those things and about some of the administrative items that need to be taken care of after the festival. We have to convert the film market site to a selection committee site to prepare for the submissions for the next year. So the way it works is we have a website that serves as a selection committee website. So when films come in and we start accepting submissions, we put them on that site, and then a selection committee can view them from anywhere and rate them from anywhere. And right before the festival happens, we convert that site to the film market site. Now, the film market site contains all the films that were submitted and accepted for this year, and is available to visiting press and the filmmakers in the Filmmaker Lounge. So it's the same site with a different front end and a different search engine on it. But we have to do some cleanup work there. And then, how did that end up in there again?
We have that twice.
Okay. We're going to do that again. We're going to do our final grant report twice. Get twice as much.
Next slide. All right, now we're to March. We start figuring out how to run the next festival that early in terms of starting to figure out our budget based on what we did this year, in terms of our profit, where we made money, what we want to spend money on in the future. Also, there's the next grant we have to apply for, and the deadline is varied for that.
It's usually in March, which is just cruel.
Yeah.
I mean, we're exhausted from doing the festival, and we immediately need to do a grant application, which is a brutal process. If you've ever filled out a grant application, it's just incredibly difficult, a piece of writing to do, and there's a lot of information that needs to go into it. The audience survey data, they want to know, what percentage of our audience fits into this category or age group, or where they came from, and it's a very long, unpleasant narrative that needs to be written, and they want it like immediately after this festival. We don't even get a chance to breathe before we have to fill that stuff out, and it's just the way it is. It's just their grant cycle. It has nothing to do with when our festival happens. It's that their application for this particular grant is just due in March, and that's the way it is.
But I am proud to say that historically we've always scored one of the top scores in the state. They have guest panels each year that rate the applications, and we're always one of the top scorers. So I'm very proud of that fact.
Yeah, they like the thoroughness of our report, and they get some of these applications in crayon, really, and the people don't take the time to fill in all the data that they need to process the application, because they have to make sure they're not just handing out money to anybody who wants it, or else we'd all be there.
Right.
Oh, you want me to take over? Okay.
Oh, it's mine?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Still your slide.
It's on my slide. Then we go through and get ready to start selecting films for the next cycle. And the first thing we have to do is update Without a Box. Without a Box, if you don't know, is an online submission service where film festivals sign up, and their member filmmakers are able to submit all the paperwork electronically, and often the preview screener electronically through their service. So we have to update our guidelines, our categories, our deadline dates, and so on with them first before it becomes public. We tend to take submissions, I believe, in the next slide, which will be April, which is called entries right down there at the bottom.
The Without a Box guidelines are a complicated piece of writing as well. We have to set up all the rules for submissions and the submission categories that we're going to accept, and submission fees for each category. It's a complicated process, and it's about to become much more complicated for us. In the past, we've used Without a Box exclusively for online submissions. Coming up next year, we're going to branch out to some other submission services as well. Without a Box used to require exclusivity, and they no longer do, so we'll be adding services, different ways to submit to the festival, plus which we've always accepted films directly, like you can mail it in, fill in a paper form, so that stuff needs to be updated as well. And then
I have just thought of a secret. Want the first secret? There's a secret that if you find one of us at another festival in person, you can hand us your film on DVD or Blu-ray, and it's automatically submitted, no submission fee. But you have to find us in person.
Which is a neat trick, yeah, because I hide the rest of the time. And then we put out our call for entries as soon as humanly possible after this festival, as soon as we can get all that set up, and we want to do it as quickly as we can, because submission fees make up a good portion of our budget, and the sooner we can start accepting films, the sooner we can start climbing out of debt from the last festival.
And also gives us more time to watch them, because we're up to quite a number of films for submissions now.
It's completely out of control at this point, the number of films that we have to watch. And, it's difficult to maybe have sympathy for that and say, well, you get to watch films all day. But the ones that end up in the final schedule are the gems. And there's a lot of separation of the wheat and the chaff. They're not all the same quality that you see at the festival. There's lots of chaff.
And it's
that
not
needs to
just
be
watching,
combed through.
not watching films just all day. It's like all day, every day for like a year,
It's
almost.
that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. It's a daily chore, and I can tell you that I watch every film that is submitted from beginning to end, all the way through. I feel if a filmmaker has gone out there and made his film and then paid the submission fee, he deserves to have somebody watch it. And I think that's all they can really ask, is that you watch every film from beginning to end. I don't think it would be fair to pile on the schedule with film. I think that there's a belief out there among filmmakers that if they don't submit their film to a film festival early, that it maybe never even gets watched because they've already filled up their schedule. That's not the way we do it here. Side. Well, in March we have a volunteer party, so that needs to be organized and set up, and we do this to thank our volunteers who work so hard to put this festival together. Actually, when the festival starts, I stop working, and the volunteers take over. They actually do all the work. So we have a line item in our budget for the volunteers, so we can throw them a nice party and a nice thank you.
All right, then we come together for our first board meeting of the season to talk about our plans, what to improve, what to change, what to drop, and so on. And then submissions start to arrive. Now, we've gone electronic, and this is something John has helped bring to the festival, is some of the high-tech qualities. So at this point, the films are converted, either they're converted to a digital format and placed on our selection committee site, which eventually becomes the market site. Or this year we adapted where we're able to take electronic copies of the films directly. In other words, they don't send us a Blu-ray or DVD. It's either through the online screener through Without a Box, or they literally mail us a link to like a QuickTime movie. And that's what percentage of our exhibition copies were electronic?
75%.
75% electronic. And since I kind of oversee the projection aspect of the festival, I'm mulling going to a completely digital system where we're going to use, hopefully, a disc server next year, and there's no physical copy ever of the film. And it's all software-driven server as opposed to the various decks we have. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll get to that. And then, we have to deal with our taxes. We're a 501c3, and depending on our budget that year, we either file a short form or a long form for the 501c3.
Isn't it a bit silly, though, as a nonprofit organization, we actually have to file a tax return? I don't know, we don't pay taxes.
Even though we don't pay taxes, we are tax exempt, we still have to file some type of paperwork with the IRS. And the 501c3 status is not particularly easy to get, especially when you're first starting out. So we had to spend a lot of time preparing the paperwork to get that status in the first place.
Yeah, but the tax return, whether we do the short form or the long form, the short form is a postcard. We send them a postcard and let them know we're alive. Here we are. And the long form, we have to file every so often regardless. So it's on a schedule, so I think this year is the long form.
And it's interesting that the long forms are publicly available, so you can look up the tax returns for nonprofit organizations over a certain budget. I can't remember, it's $25,000 or whatever it is. Michelle knows. Michelle's our accountant.
I don't know. I have no idea.
All right, next slide, please.
In June, Lee and I typically, both of us or one of us, will go out to Palm Springs International Short Fest in Palm Springs, California. And that's a lot of fun for us. They run a big operation there. They run for 6 days, and they run 3 screens. So there's constantly movies playing. But we spend most of our time in their film market there and talking to different filmmakers and their film organizers. And we're out there promoting the Damn Short Film Festival. And we're also keeping our eyes open for films.
Yeah, I tend to spend 2 to 3 days in the market. I don't even go to the screenings anymore. I spend that time going through their market book, and they have about 3,000 films on their shelf through their submissions. They have every single film on a disc. I go through their giant market guide and look for films that are hard to, they don't necessarily come in as submissions very often, like good short documentaries, comedies, we're always looking for those, things that we might not naturally get enough of. And I'll watch about 100 films in like 2.5 days.
The family films are very difficult to find.
Family films are extremely difficult to find because family for us in Boulder City is the most ultra G-rated film you could possibly imagine. That's what we used to try to do. But it's so difficult to find them that we either had to drop the program or shift it to a slightly more mature audience. Now it's actually rated PG. But clean films that are entertaining and fun are just hard to find. All right, next slide. All right, so we're continuing to get submissions, and then we start working on things like artwork, and we generate the poster, the website, themes, and so on. And traditionally, we've had different artists doing the posters every year, different local Las Vegas artists or students, or occasionally I'll do it myself. So we start to set up the look for the festival. All right, next, please.
All right, as we're coming through the home stretch of the year, our final submission deadline is November 1st. Now, when I came on as director, the final submission deadline was December 1st, and then we announced our schedule on January 1st. So I very quickly realized that this was not enough time to make the schedule a full month. Watch the final films that came in by December 1st, and do all that. It was just too much at that point of the year. So we backed it up to November 1st. It may have cost us a few submissions, but we're able to take care of the filmmakers that are accepted a lot better this way, get a notification to everybody. So we backed it up some. So it costs us a few submissions, but gives us a chance to administrate the festival a lot better. We watch the remaining submissions that have come in, and we create the screening blocks and do some of the schedule creation work, which we will talk about a little later in the presentation.
All right, so we announce our schedule on January 1st, and we've always done that, and we do it within a few hours. Also, all the filmmakers are notified via email about the same time. And so all the acceptance emails go out, which we love doing, and then all the rejection emails go out, which I think is John and I's least favorite part of the entire festival. It always kind of breaks our heart because we understand that the selection process is somewhat subjective, and people poured their time, their money, and their passion into these films. So if we have to reject one, it just like, it feels like a stab in the heart. We're also filmmakers too, so we have sympathy there. But we have to do it. We contact everyone.
No one likes to be rejected at all, and no one likes to issue these rejections. But it's and I can tell you that this season in particular was very difficult. I think at the end there were 40 films on my desk that I wanted to program but couldn't fit in even with 5 days. So yeah, some good films are getting rejected, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, or it's just how the program works out for our festival. Also, we start to look for sponsors, which are an important part of our festival, and also start collecting donations for the silent auction. And then the last couple of years, we've added guest jurists. We've always had, or almost always had, our audience awards, which you guys have seen, where you vote for your favorite film. But we added a jury back last year to add a second layer of awards, and these are people in the industry that we select that have some experience in short films. And we did that because we wanted to lay some groundwork potentially for applying to the Academy, the Motion Picture Academy, to potentially get Academy Award status. If we were to get that as a festival, it means that if you win a Best of Award in a certain category, it's an automatic qualification for Academy Award consideration. Doesn't mean you'll be nominated, but it's a huge step forward to have your film recognized. Now we have to go through the application process for that, which we have not done yet, but we're laying groundwork for things they'd like to see. They'd like to see jurists in certain categories.
Yeah, bringing the Jurist Award back was there were really the two reasons. There was the one, which is we're trying to lay the groundwork to become an Academy qualifying festival, and they are very large on jury awards. So actually part of that application is how many films won awards, who are the judges, that kind of thing. And I realized when I looked at this application that we didn't have any of those things, that if we wanted to be considered for to be approved, that we needed to change our festival a little bit. But the other reason is that in some cases, a filmmaker can stack the audience with his entire entourage. And in some rare instances, there were films winning audience awards that I thought there was a better film in the block or in the category. And while we really do we really love the Audience Choice Awards, I think it's a really great part of this festival where the audience chooses who wins. We wanted to balance it out, so now we have both the Audience Awards, so the audience still gets to vote, and we have a jury award separate. So it makes it a big balance, and then a film can only win one award. So if it wins a jury award...
Yeah, basically, if somebody wins a jury award, then the audience, there's no overlap. So if somebody wins a jury award, and yet still has the highest audience vote, it's the second highest audience vote in that category that winds up winning the audience vote. So it's one award. We used to do it a few years ago where sometimes people could win two awards, like Best of the Fest and some other award. We felt it would be more fair to spread them out to a large number of films.
And the Best of the Fest award is an Audience Choice Award, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. In January, the schedule's been announced, and now we're contacting the filmmakers to get their exhibition copies. We're hoping that this will become an easier process for us. This is the first year that we accepted digital copies over the internet as exhibition copies. And it has not been a perfect process because we've taken those files and burned them to Blu-ray. So we've basically done some of that work for the filmmaker. But with all the different file formats out there and codecs, it's been a complicated process on our end that required a lot of man hours. And the projection preparation begins. We're hoping that, as Lee said, that we'll move to a completely digital projection, meaning right off a hard drive, a disk server, and burn no Blu-rays in the future. And I think that would be an amazing leap forward. We're talking to the filmmakers at this time about who wants to be in the filmmaker panel, who wants to be in the press conference, who wants to be in different events, and we schedule them for that. And then we have to go out and get the locations for the events, and Leslie Page usually handles getting the locations for the different parties at the different businesses here that host us for the post-awards party and the mixer and so forth.
All right, then it's time to print all that art. I mean, aside from the posters, we develop art for the T-shirts, hats, programs, and so on. We start ordering these. And as you notice, our program has gotten quite large. We love to put all 171 films, or however many we have, on the program itself, but that requires a lot of time typesetting to get that to fit. And you saw how big the programs are this year, 11 by 25.5 inches, so it's a bit of a challenge. But we like our originality on our art, and the fact that the art changes sometimes, like the poster changes each year, and we involve a lot of local artists, like students and so on. Then we have to purchase any kind of raw materials we need, food, voting chips, whatever we need for that year. And then we start doing press appearances and interviews. Like this year, John was on Channel 13, right? And John's been on the KNPR in the past. I've also done it. And then interviews with some of the local newspapers and weeklies and things. Next, please.
All right, setup day is always a lot of fun. The equipment arrives early in the morning, and we have to set it up and test it. And this can be a challenging process because the projection equipment, we don't own it, we rent it, which makes complete sense because we don't use it for the rest of the year. And as a result of it, it's expensive, but we get the latest stuff. So we're always, it seems each year so far, the projection quality has gone up considerably. I think this year it's quite good. It's very bright, all high def. We're using a high definition switcher this year. But the disadvantage is that because the equipment is always new and we only do projection a few days a year, no one is really an expert at the equipment. And so this year we had quite a few setup problems with some of the high definition stuff. We had to get an engineer out here to help us, but it's a balancing act of having exact knowledge of the equipment and having the latest stuff. But it's, so it can be a challenge. We have to, and then once the projection equipment is set up, we do a dry run of the entire film program. We don't run each film all the way through. We drop it in and check it out, make sure it's all right, but we do that with all the films, right, Lee?
Yeah, basically Ken Co, who's on our board, is also our lead projectionist. Him and his assistants, like trainees, will go through the entire program one film at a time. And mark notes about how the film starts. Is there a menu? Is it instant play? Is it Blu-ray? Is it DVD? What's the audio? Is there audio on the menu? And so on. Because it's still very manual. We have Blu-ray discs we have to switch out. So the transitions between films is manual. So we're trying to avoid starting to film late or cutting it off too soon. Occasionally you'll see a little mistake slip through. But it's kind of a daunting task. But in order to help make it smoother, if we have a lot of notes and tested discs in advance, it helps out a lot. And that generally takes like 3 hours just to run through the entire thing.
Desi pointed out to me the other day that, while everything here is pre-recorded, what we're really doing as a festival is a live show. So we get an occasional bump.
Occasionally the Blu-ray acts up or there's a surprise on one of the films we weren't expecting. We have to deal with it. But one interesting thing is we keep a backup of every single film beside the master copy. So we're always ready to swap out a bad disc if we have to. And we've never lost a film ever in 10 years.
You should have said that.
No, it's okay. We're never going to lose one.
2 days to go here.
No, we're never going to lose one.
Oh, no. Oh, that's...
I will come up on stage and act it out if that happens.
Oh, my gosh. All right, yeah. I don't hold the projection staff responsible at this point if a film drops out for this festival. And then all the other stuff needs to be set up. The will call desk, the filmmaker lounge, the sales desk here in the lobby, the silent auction. So the staff's running around setting things up, getting it ready, and it's all a one-day process.
Next. Okay, I guess this is the next slide, right? Then we set up the press lounge with all the groovy furniture. I'm not sure who's been down there to see it. We bring in...
That's a good secret. Tell us about the furniture for the press lounge.
Well, the press lounge in the past has been a bit thin. We borrowed furniture. It's been a little bit bare, folding chairs. We wanted to jazz it up a bit. So last year we had the idea, Anita and myself, to go to thrift stores, buy furniture temporarily, and then return it, give it away, or sell it afterwards. So this year, Anita and some of our volunteers went out and bought like that 20-foot couch and some side chairs, and we borrowed some tables from the antique store next door. Fun stuff, just to make it a little bit more interesting. This year we bought table covers, and we print some posters, and then, of course, filmmakers send us their handouts while they send in their films, so we put those out there too. And then we set out the food and the beverages, and we tend to restock that throughout the festival. And then we set up all the check-in materials we need in terms of preparing the swag bags and getting the will call ready to go and so on.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the festival budget and where the money comes from and goes to. According to this graph, most of our money comes from sponsorships, about 40%. Now, sponsorships include sponsorships from businesses like Boulder Credit Union and so forth, some of the sponsors you see at the end of the slides, but it includes a grant from the Nevada Arts Council and any other grants that we've managed to pick up, and also private sponsorships from individual donors. Now, this is an area that our festival has not been tremendously successful at getting sponsors and keeping them. It has been a major challenge in hard economic times to keep sponsors coming back and get new ones. But it's a delicate balancing act because, you know, we're here in this small town, and we're not one of these big, enormous fests that has Coca-Cola as a sponsor. But at the same time, there's such a charm to being here in this town that it kind of outweighs the fact that we can't get huge sponsors. But we continue to look for new sponsors. The next largest portion of our budget comes from pass and ticket sales. And then below that is the submission fees. And I would like to see our submission fee percentage drop. The hard reality of having a film on the festival circuit is that the losers pay for the winners to go. Whether your film is accepted or not, when you submit, you pay a submission fee. And since there are more films rejected than there are accepted, it's like that larger portion of films that didn't make it in are funding the festival for those who did. And then we get a little bit from the silent auction. It's always been a good earner for us. And hats and T-shirts are always fun.
And in terms of the grant, basically we get one grant now, which is Nevada Arts Council. I think it's about 5%, 5 to 10% of our budget.
About 10%.
10%, so it's pretty small. So essentially we're 90% publicly funded.
Well, isn't the grant publicly funded?
Well, I mean publicly funded in terms of people coming in as an audience or the filmmakers supporting our festival. I think in terms of taxes, it's considered publicly funded.
Oh.
All right, another pie chart. Cool. All right, in terms of where we spend the money, I mean, you can see the chart. We have a small salary set up, and that is almost exclusively for John right now. The difference between our two positions is John right now essentially runs the day-to-day operations of the festival. He runs the office, he does the correspondence, he talks to all the filmmakers and so on. So he's working all year long. So we try to set a part of the budget to pay him a small amount. It's not a huge amount, but hopefully something he can buy.
Pays
something
for
nice.
gas.
Yeah, he's for gas. Yeah, I mean, but we do always have a small portion set aside for some payment. And then there's expenses associated with fundraising in terms of promotional materials, postage, and so on. 20% is administrative or expenses. That would include running the office, I guess, any kind of office expenses.
Well, the largest portion of money is the program expense, and you can see what some of those expenses are: the equipment rental, the theater rent, the travel, printing, catering, development of the awards. You know, we have to pay for the awards material and to get those made. Administrative expenses is the next slide. Hang on one second with this though. You know, I'm proud of the fact that the salary expense is under 15%, and it just depends on how much money comes in as what we can spend. The more we can bring in, the lower we can make that number. And I don't want the salaries to get out of control. I want most of the money to be spent on the festival. I mean, there's always going to be expenses with office rent and things like that, but I want it to be spent here in this theater. Can we go to the next slide? And there's some of the example of the administrative expense. That's going to be office rent. We maintain an office at the hotel year-round where we have our, all our stuff. We got to store it somewhere, and we have a desk where we can sit and work, watch films and that kind of thing. And it's where we store all the stuff from the festival, the red carpet, the big photo backdrop that's in the filmmaker lounge and things like that. We have a post office box where we receive mail submissions and stuff like that. Postage is a big expense. This year we started, it was a suggestion from one of our big supporters and volunteers, Chuck Pride, that we, it was a long process between the time that you submit a film and the time that you find out you've received an answer about it. You can submit your film in March and the schedule doesn't come out until January. So to make contact with those filmmakers now, we send a postcard out when your film is submitted and say, thanks for the submission, we'll let you know in January. So at least you hear something along the way that we received your submission. So our postage has gone up, and it's office supplies, there's a few licenses we need to have. and insurance is a killer. It's expensive.
How the films are selected. So we accept short films that are essentially 0 or 1 minute up to 40 minutes by our guidelines. And we don't care where they came from. We don't care who's in them, what the subject is. There's no limitations on it.
Well, we have one limitation.
What's that?
And that's, it'll say on our website, and I was something that actually asked by the press this year about, we rarely show a film that would receive an R rating.
That's true. We do warn people that we rarely program anything that's that extreme. They're still free to submit, but we say the odds are extremely low. But that's where Underground's for. We try to put the more racy ones and naughty ones there.
Good program this year. Don't miss Underground this year.
What's
it's
that?
Tonight. Underground program is tonight. Yeah,
it's always fun
Yeah.
if you like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
I don't know. And then we have our standard submission categories that we developed many, many years ago, which you see right there, the drama, comedy, horror/sci-fi, because they're often intertwined, documentary, animation, student, and of course Nevada filmmaker to support the local filmmakers. Next slide.
All right, the films get transposed to the selection committee site, and then the selection committee members watch and rate the films. It's a very brief rating form. It's like, what category do you think this film fits in?
Rating?
Yes, no, or maybe is the rating level. It's not a 1 to 10 thing. It's very simple. Because everybody has different criteria on how they rate a film. So we want to make it as simple as possible so we could use those results in a meaningful way when we create the schedule. We stopped taking submissions on November 1st, and then using the selection committee ratings as a guide, I start whittling them down into some type of schedule, which is a neat trick. And I watch all the films that are submitted beginning to end before we start creation of the schedule, which I think is the most fair way to do it. It's the most laborious, but it gives everybody a fair shot, and there's always gems that come in at the end that we don't want to miss.
All right, so then John breaks them into thematic program blocks, and you probably notice how we like to have themes. Themes are different every year based on what we get. And some themes come very close to fruition, but then die at the last second because we're missing the fifth film to make it a complete block. For instance, John almost put together a shopping cart block this year. Very close. Just missing one film to do the shopping cart theme. For whatever reason, there were films with shopping carts as main props, but we just didn't quite have enough.
Even, Chuck even made a shopping cart film.
Yeah.
And we still didn't have enough for the block. We were a good 15 minutes short, I think. But it was an interesting idea, yeah.
Yeah, and then, for instance, the avant-garde musical block came together pretty late. We realized we had enough musicals to make an entire avant-garde musical block. But that might never happen again. It just depends what we have.
One year had a horror comedy block. That was great.
Yeah,
and
comedic
I
horror.
would love to do that again, but it depends on what films come in. And
Yeah.
if we don't have that kind of film, we have to go some other direction.
And it's something that John and I think a lot about in terms of how the films fit together, what the general vibe is, what the rating's going to be, all those things. And then those are arranged to a schedule. And that, again, varies each year. The exception would be that the racier ones and ones with heavier ratings tend to go later at night because we're sensitive to our audience. And we don't put horror in the morning, and we don't put underground in the morning. That's one tradition we follow. And then a few others, like we tend to put comedy and Nevada filmmakers on a Friday or Saturday. And then once John goes through his initial pass, I'll go through and watch all the films. I'll take into consideration films I might have seen at Palm Springs. And then we talk about it, and we'll see on the next slide.
All right. Lee changed this slide on me. That's dirty pull. Okay. What it actually is supposed to say is that the director and executive director fight over the schedule until a final schedule is arranged. But
there's an example right there, yeah.
so I'll make the schedule, I'll lay out the whole schedule, and then Lee will watch the entire schedule. And then, yes, we fine-tune it. And, I think there's been less and less fine-tuning necessary year after year as I've gotten better at doing it. Lee has a lot of experience in this kind of festival management and knows more about the audience that we receive here. And I'm learning that quickly, and I learned very quickly how it works. So it's become less necessary to fine-tune it over the years, and there were, in fact, very few changes to the original schedule that I made, I think.
Yeah, I want to mention that, we definitely argue about some films because we have different tastes sometimes. And I have to say that sometimes John is right and I'm wrong. Sometimes it's the opposite. I'm right and John's wrong. Sometimes we're both wrong.
I think that's true. I think that that gives us a good balance in our program.
I think it's good because John will put in some films I might have just skipped, and vice versa. And luckily, John has a very similar sensibility to me in general. So there's a lot of films we do agree on. And when I see one of his themes he might put together, a lot of times I'm like, hey, that's perfect. We're good to go. Though it's interesting that after some of the programs, we'll be out there in the lobby or even during the program discussing how we could have made it better. Because we're in the back listening to audience reaction. It's like, and we'll talk about could we have made a better choice someplace. And so we're dissecting it even before it's over.
And there's some negotiating that goes on. I'll give you that film for this film.
It does
on
happen.
Occasion. And I can remember an example. It was a few years back. There was a movie that we ran called Incest the Musical. And did you like that one? Yeah. Lee did not want to put that movie in.
I was very resistant to that.
Yeah.
But it paid off, and there'll be a couple examples from this year that would be the same. But I think we're close enough in sensibility that we're able to work together and come up with something new.
Yeah. Can we go back one slide? Is that possible? Can we go back? No?
Oops,
okay.
that's my mistake.
We're going to miss that secret. I hope you watch. All right, so let's talk about some of the great secrets. Our first secret is, though, even though many people tell us how much they love the Damn Short Film Festival, and we receive a lot of compliments, and how great it is, we regularly suffer complete and total failures. It's a daily thing that we fail miserably, horribly, total epic failure. And it's true, it is, and that's fine. I mean, the whole event is really great. It really is, and it attracts a lot of people, and people come back every year, and that's something we're proud of. But the hard reality of it is that the failure is constant. We constantly fail, and when somebody comes up to me and tells me, you did this wrong, I take it personally, not because I'm angry at myself because I didn't do it better. There are a lot of failures, so it's not as slick as everybody thinks. There's lots of disasters that occur along the way.
There's many intrigues behind the scenes. We're running back and forth, solving problems all the time, although it's gotten smoother over the years. One thing that I think we developed with the festival is the ability to be fluid. We're fluid with the budget. We're fluid with the number of days. We expand and contract. We try things. And if we feel that the payoff is not great enough, we cut them out. So if you go and look at our 10-year history at our schedule, there are things we did, and they no longer exist. And there'll probably be a few little things we adapt from this year as we go into the next year.
Yeah, Lee said this year that everything we do is experimental. I don't know if that means everything we do fails, but
no, not at all. It means we take chances sometimes, and we know it's a risk, and we talk about the risk beforehand.
We do, some examples over the years. We took a risk in moving the filmmaker panel from the lounge or an auxiliary location into the theater here, and the panel in previous years had been stuffed. That room was crammed. We couldn't get in there with all the people that were in there, so we decided it'd be great to bring it into the theater. And it looks kind of empty sometimes with the amount of crowd. And it's a risk that we took to bring it into the theater. And we did it again this year, and yes, it's not the biggest crowd, or it doesn't appear to be, because the room here is so much larger, but we do get those great video clips that the filmmakers get to use as just one example.
Yeah, and the big risk for us this year is going 5 days. First day for us to go to 5 days over a holiday weekend with Valentine's Day. And despite our experience, we were not sure how it's going to turn out, and we're still not sure. We'll still see what the numbers are Sunday or when we're finished with the festival, and then we'll decide at some point whether we want to stay 5 days, shrink to 4. We'll just have to see. Next secret. Oh, I get this one. It's true, not all films are equal. And we realized when we programmed that we'd love all the films to be these amazing, stellar ones that every single person gives a 5-star rating, but that's impossible. First, it's impossible for everyone to agree on what they like. And second, films at that high pinnacle of perfection are just not, there are not many out there. And of course, you know, we have to realize it's all subjective too. What plays great here might not play great in another location, another city, or another festival. But we recognize that, and we really strive to put together the strongest programs possible. But sometimes we just have to round out a block. We need an extra film. We still one film from one program put into another to try to fill it out, and we try to bring you the best films possible. But the reality is, as programmers, we sometimes have to not exactly settle, but make the schedule functional by picking things that may be rated a little bit lower than our personal favorites.
We have to make sacrifices in the schedule, and I can tell you after 3 years of doing it that there is no way to please not only anybody, I mean not only everybody, but anybody. Everybody has a problem with a schedule of this size, including myself. And when it comes to selecting films for the schedule, sometimes we're groping for one more film to fill this block that we've got programmed of a particular theme. And I think this year in our crime block, we didn't call it our crime block because it was one film that wasn't really about crime. Instead, we called it The Good and the Bad. So we have to make certain sacrifices. And yes, not all the films are spectacular. One trick that we do use is we'll put our strongest films on the ends. The first film and the last film of the block will be the films that we think are the best, the most appealing. And then when people walk out of the block, they have a good feeling about it. They remember the first film and the last film.
Well, sometimes we also put the ones with the most extreme content at the end of the block, so you can watch 4 films, and if you don't like the 5th, you can escape. If there's violence or a lot of language, things like that. So yeah, between those two things, we pay attention to the rhythm, you know, in terms of the order, and try to figure out how to make each program flow. Also in terms of length, too, how they fit together.
And our next secret is up to you. We're going to turn it over to you, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and we'd be happy to take all those questions.
Yes, let's see, do we have some mics? Or you guys are so close, we can hear you, right?
We'll repeat the question. Who has a question for us?
I'm trying to understand about the programming aspect. You select these films before you set up the categories and so forth?
The categories are set in terms of the awards, but the thematic blocks come together organically as we figure out what kind of films we have.
You're talking about some films that you don't feel are so great. Are you saying this with the idea that it's subjective? And why would you even accept them?
There's a lot of films that get rejected. We're talking about the ones that are in their top, 30%. So they're very good, but they're maybe not spectacular. So the ones that we don't like, for whatever reason, they never get into that process. We're talking about all the finalists, essentially. Then we start to cluster them together and figure out how they fit. So it's not like a maybe or a no. It's the ones that are yeses, but not all yeses are necessarily equal in our subjective opinions. That's where you have to kind of play with that.
And it surprises me when we do the audience voting sometimes. We'll count the votes from the chips when the audience makes it. And I am sometimes shocked at what the audience picked. And sometimes my favorite film, the film that I thought was the greatest, gets no votes.
And that happens to me too. And that's where sometimes he's right and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes we're both wrong. And it happens every year, and we try to avoid that. Every year, there's a couple films that are the albatross around our necks. It's like, oh man, if I just not programmed that, or wish I had, or
what was
moved
I
it.
thinking? Yeah, when I programmed that film. I've said that a couple of times.
But by the same token, I will say that the ones that do make it into the programming, I'm proud to show every one of them. These are the ones that have risen above. And so when we're talking about not being satisfied, these are because we're basically being perfectionists.
Yeah, that's
Close
true.
to it.
Listen to people on the way out, and I heard this year, I don't get that movie. I don't get this movie. I don't understand it at all. And I loved it. I totally understood it. So, that's why TVs have remote controls, I guess. Well,
No, we don't want to get into that.
well, in Boulder City, it's a difficult balancing act. I think that we can't expect all the people that come to this festival to appreciate all the subtleties of some of the films that some people who watch a lot of these things and appreciate them have. For some people who come to this festival, it's a one afternoon thing, and they come down to enjoy some films. They're not into the deep art aspect of some of them, and so yeah, it's a balancing act, and certainly not films in there that we don't want to show. If film we don't want to show it, we're not going to show it.
Yeah. And one thing we're very aware of is programming for our local audience too. We know who comes to this theater, and we have a fairly good idea of what people like to see. So we are looking for, sometimes more traditional melodramas that have no bad language. But we know we also have a crowd for underground. But we also want to slip in more stylistic things that are avant-garde. And so we try to provide things for our local audiences that they'll enjoy, at the same time maybe expand their minds a little bit with some new types of filmmaking.
Yeah, and with a short film, or a short film festival, I mean, if you don't like the movie, it's over in a couple of minutes and you're on to the next one. You're not married to a film for an hour and a half. So I like to think that over the 171 films, there's going to be stuff that you don't like and stuff you do.
Definitely, yeah.
I have a sort of follow-up comment. This is an audience secret for you guys, and that is that we can not get a movie, but understand, like, that was an amazing performance, like that actor or actress put out something amazing and you really appreciate it, but it doesn't mean you're going to vote for it, and over
of course,
and over again.
Yeah.
That's sort of the fun part of this. I love the part where I get to put a chip in a box.
And it's hard for you guys sometimes. I see people scratching their heads going, I don't know which one to vote for. And that's great, because we love to see that. We want to see a hard decision.
Yeah.
The programs where the votes are really closely tied, I love seeing that. It's the ones that maybe one has like 100 votes and there's 0 and 1 and 2. I'm more worried about that.
Yeah, I watch enough movies to know what a good movie is, but it doesn't mean I like it.
No, of course, and that's where it's subjective. And as we program, we recognize that there's a lot of fantastic talent going into these films. Sometimes it's great acting is in there, but maybe technically it's rough. Maybe we have 4 films that have the same general plot. There's so many factors that go into it that if they get rejected, it doesn't mean it's a bad film. It just means it doesn't fit in here for whatever reason. That's beyond the filmmaker's control.
This is a question for you, Lee. So you're a short movie fan, and then at some point you cross the speed bump, and you say, "Okay, now I'm going to do a festival." That seems to me like a huge and almost impossible task, because I've had ideas about a couple different festivals, but every time I think about it, I think this is too hard.
It's an insane amount of work. I don't.
So what did you do? How did you cross that boundary and say?
Well,
Okay,
I'm going to point out somebody in the audience right here. Anita Lanier, my wife right here, is a co-founder of the festival. Luckily, I had really good support from her to be a workaholic, and she put a lot of hours in herself on the festival initially. I had started making short films. I went to a lot of festivals all over the place, and he was able to join me on some of the festivals. We recognized there's these fantastic shorts that would disappear at some point. And to be honest, I can't remember how the process started in terms of talking about starting a festival. We just I can't remember who thought of it first, to be honest. But we started mulling it over and talk about it every once in a while. We knew that the best festivals were in small towns. And then a series of events led us to find a small town to move to. And once we're here, we're like, this actually might be a good place. And then once we decided to do it, we acted like we were going to start a festival, and we started talking to people. Luckily, we had some really good local support. We had people like Nikki Collins and others that came in, and we were fairly new to the town at that point, who came in and helped introduce us, and I think that for me personally, it was like, as soon as I made up my mind that we wanted to do this, that it was just going to get done. And we were going to push forward, start small. The first year I was making my own tickets, like cutting them out of pieces of paper, and then slowly grow. And that, I think by doing that, it's a little bit more manageable. It's still very difficult.
Was the first year just a one-day event?
2.5 days? 2 days? Though, yeah, we forgot about that. We since fixed that. But no, it was 2.5. It was like 2 days and one screening, and it was very bungee corded together in a way. But literally, you should have seen the equipment we had. But the whole time we were doing this, we treated it very seriously, and we never really altered from our mission statement, which was to show the best films we possibly can to local audiences. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is to treat the filmmakers as good as we possibly can. And a lot of it came out of our own personal experiences from traveling to film festivals, and then me having films in festivals. Sometimes I go to some of the festivals on my own and having miserable experiences. Want to do it right. Questions? Back here?
I'm sorry if you covered this earlier. I'm afraid I came in late. But could you talk more about the selection committee, how many of them there are, and do all of them work all year on these films?
Yeah, I mean, it's 6 or 8 months of submissions, or it's almost the entire year watching films. That's something we're going to revise because poor John has had to watch 550 films this year. I got off a little bit easier. I watched fewer of them, more like the final selections. It's impossible. We do have a selection committee that do watch films. We have to expand it, so the answer would be it's not big enough right now. You want to add to that, John?
Well, the entire board of directors is on the selection committee, amongst others, and there's some volunteers that help. But they are not as active with it as we need them to be to watch all these films. And life gets in the way, especially when you're a volunteer and you have things to do in life, and not everybody can dedicate the time that's necessary. So, sometimes what I'll see is somebody votes on 20 films this week, and then next week they watch 20 films, and all of a sudden they stop, and they stop voting on the films. And so it makes it tough. So I kind of dedicated myself to watching them all. But we're going to have to change the process for this season because it become overwhelming. We had a 20% increase in submissions this year over the previous year. So we're going to look at some strategies to make it easier to program. And I think the selection committee, their responsibility will be more to separate out the really bad ones, the really unplayable ones. And you would be amazed at some of the films that get sent in. And if you go out and pick up a camera and go out and make a movie, you have instant respect from me because it is not easy. And then if you take that movie and you send it into a film festival for someone else to judge, then you even have more respect from me. But still, some of them are quite awful. So we're going to try and use the selection committee in the future to separate out the ones that are just completely unprogrammable, and concentrate on selecting from the better ones. It's a process we're talking about now, trying to figure out how it would work better.